every day talking to a faith-based community, and maybe everybody in here is not faith-based, but since that was my agenda, that's what I'm going to talk to, and I'm talking to you too. But I want to come from this angle on a spiritual side. I want to look at it a little bit different than I normally look at it with different groups. And so I want to start off in saying, for me, modern day slavery is in every city of America today. We have been infiltrated with a false sense of love that has been manipulating our daughters, sisters, friends, and family members into believing the lie that sex trafficking / prostitution is a secure place to have all your needs met. Also, many young men have believed in the lie that pimping is the only proactive way of making money, gaining power, and getting their emotional and physical and financial and social needs met. You may be wondering, what does this mean regarding the sex trafficking problem in America? I would like to share with you how this to me is a form of modern day slavery. I want you to know that I believe that we have a spiritual Goliath in our land today, and that you and I can defeat together. This modern day slavery is masking and concealing the minds to believe that there is no perceivable choice to live, love, or gather finances and to be empowered. And in America, girls and boys are trusting in this Goliath, this giant, which has shiny armor of protection and has the weapons of false love and financial prosperity. In the Bible, we know that there was a young man, he was appointed king, but before he reigned as king, he slew his Goliath of his day. And I just want to say to you, who is this Goliath of our day? I would say Satan, I would say evil. And who is this Goliath using to destroy our children? Is using businesses that sell sex, broken males, pimps, boys. Is using, the system's using foster care system, fatherlessness, homelessness, inadequate school systems, the new Jim Crow, which I call the prison system, racism, violence, drug addiction, and homelessness. And in every city of America, people are forced to sell their fragile, immature bodies to men from every social, economic environment. These girls, as well as young women, are looked upon and treated as property to be bought and resold to the highest bidder. But now you may be asking yourself how this could happen in our cities or country. I would like to introduce to some and refresh to others the Maslow hierarchy of needs theory and how it relates to the Goliath of the day. Goliath understands what it means to have all your natural and spiritual needs met. He uses deception to destroy people. And I want us to look at this not just as a natural thing. I think it's a spiritual warfare as well. And I think we have to be equipped on both ways. You know, it would be foolish for me to only be equipped in the spiritual realm but have no understanding or insight in the natural realm. That's foolishness. And so I have learned to take both of these elements and apply it to the work. And so what am I talking about? Who am I talking about? I will weave my story and I will weave other stories inside of this. So what I'm talking about is the sex industry, as I talked to the medical students this morning. When I talked about, for me, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's a hierarchy of needs in the sex industry. For example, the lowest level is the survival sex. For those who work with homeless people, youth, survival sex. That's where young people will sell their bodies in a way that is for the newest electronics, maybe a phone, an iPhone, or a computer, or maybe even drugs, or maybe the latest Jordans, tennis shoes, or whatever it is. That is survival sex. So that's a little different than the other different levels, or some of you may also even know about or work with those who are on the streets working for drugs. You know, there is a population of women working for drugs and selling their bodies in order to get a fix from their drugs. Or for me, I work with girls that were working on the streets, but the population that I work with were selling their bodies, but they had pimps. And the age range that I tried to stick with was those who were from 11 years old to up to 27. I tried to stick with that group, and because those were the group that the organization that I used to work with was working with youth, and I tried to keep it in there. I wasn't limited, but I tried to keep it there because those were the ones that we were trying to reach at an earlier age. Not that the others weren't important, because they were. Working for home is the next level, or working from the hotels, like your hotels up on North First, all those hotel motels, or apartments or brothels, or by personal ads like The Stranger, the Back Page, and those different personal ads. And then up next level up, it was your exotic dancers, your strip clubs, your massage parlors, your porn, your internet, you know, all these different levels of the sex industry. And then the top level that I have is the high price escort services, which, you know, it's like I'm not on the street, you look like the woman in Pretty Woman, and you have all these different things, but you're still doing the same thing. It's still selling your body. And thinking about the movie Pretty Woman. You know, when Pretty Woman first came out, many of us liked that movie. I liked that movie until I began to really look at that movie. Now, we talk about Julia Roberts and how she ended up with the man with the logos card. You know, most girls are not going to end up like that. But the other thing about that movie, I rarely hear people even recognize. If you look at that movie again, and you look at the beginning of the movie, when the tourists were taking pictures of the girl that was found in the garbage can, this was a girl that was working. She was found dead in the garbage can. And yet the tourists were taking pictures, they were all excited. Or in the other part of that picture was, if you look at Julia Roberts, her best friend that was in the movie, she was drug addicted, right? And she was still working. And if you notice the pimp and how he was treating her, the guy was treating her in that movie. And so when I look at that movie now, it tells a story, but it also tells a story that this is not a healthy environment. So it's not just about getting the guy and then you go run off and live happy ever after. It doesn't work like that for most of our girls. And so in that, I also would like to talk about the males. You know, because I think sometimes when I think about it and people think about it, we don't talk about the guys pimping. And for me, I like to talk about them because there's the different levels even with them. When we think about pimps, we think about those that are on the streets, that are gangs, that are pimping girls. And you probably have some of them, and if anybody's here from Sunnyside and different places, you probably have quite a bit of those guys that are in gangs that are pimping girls. But then the next level up is the guys that I was around with, the street pimps. Now we have them, but then you go up a little bit, we don't think about a lot like cyber trafficking. You know, we got Craigslist to change their mind. The Voice is still having an issue, but Backpage is still having an issue. They won't let go. And so that's cyber, to me, trafficking. And then the brothel owners, that's trafficking. And then you have the strip club business owners and the escort services. But what do we call them? We call the Backpage, we call the Voice, we call all these different places, we call them businesses. But yet they still have a form of trafficking in them. We call the strip club owners and the brothel owners, they're running businesses. Yeah, they're running businesses, but they're running businesses that are using women. They're running businesses that are causing harm to women. There is to me, no safe brothel. If a woman, like in Greece and even in Vegas, if she has to work 8 hours a day, and if she only gets 5 minutes with a guy, that's abuse. Can you imagine how many men? That is not normal for anybody's body. That is causing their bodies to be destroyed. But yet, sometimes we think about them as great business owners. I don't look at them as business owners. I look at them as a place that's legalized for them to go ahead and take advantage of women. Now, in that note, a lot of times people ask me what was my story. Well, my story was pretty interesting. I grew up in, like I said, in a family of 14. Now, I was a middle child. Anybody a middle child in here? Or anybody had a middle child? And I was a middle child, but I was probably a little, I always said I was probably my mother's wildest child. And not intentionally, I just kind of like, you know, I was probably missing my father because our father wasn't in the home. And I always had a longing for my father. And I loved my father, so I was kind of rebellious in my ways. And so for me, it was amazing. I tell this story every once in a while. My father, before he left the family, I remember being a little girl and he bought me a yellow little, what we thought leather coat was a pleather coat. And he bought my sister a year older than me a blue one. And so I remember that, and like I said, I always longed for my father. And then, as I got older, my needs were not really getting met, you know, as far as financially. I mean, I had a nice home, I had clothes. I mean, if I'm in the middle, and I had 8 sisters now, so you know I was getting me some hand-me-downs. And so for those who like thrift stores, I hate them. I already lived them. So, and my sister-in-law gets mad at me because I don't like thrift stores. It's like, please, I grew up in a household with thrift stores. And so I've already had my sister shopping in the home. But in that, and so while I'm in there, and so not having my needs met, the first boy that told me I was pretty. Well, see, the other thing I didn't say when I was before I hit school, about 3 or 4 years old, I was playing Superman and with my brothers and sisters, and we had those old-fashioned glass doors. And I said I was going to jump the farthest. Guess what I did? I went straight through some glass doors. And I ended up wearing glasses. And when I came home from the hospital, I began to be called Four Eyes. You know, your sisters and brothers can be cruel. And so, but they still love you, but they can be cruel. So with that, now I had a low self-esteem at an early age. And so the first guy that told me I was pretty, I fell for him. And guess what he bought me, people? A gray leather coat. You know, so you can see the setup already. Here it was, my father, who loved me and left me, bought me a coat. Now here this first guy, as a teenager, told me he loved me and he bought a coat. And so, of course, I believed him. And then I'd always told my mother, I wasn't sexually wild, but I always told my mother, because she had so many daughters, and she's like, if you get pregnant, da, 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 you know, mothers, we do that. And it's like, well, if I get pregnant, I'm going to marry him. And so guess what I did? My words trapped me. I married the guy at the age of 16. Did I know what marriage was? And having a baby? What was I going to do with this kid? And nonetheless, I married him. As soon as I had the baby, he looks at me and he says, you know, if you really love me, you would sell your body. You would do it for the family. And remember, I'm the girl who always longed for her father, had a good mother, but that love from the father wasn't there. And so, of course, I'm going to prove my love. But on the inside of me, I knew it was wrong. I actually was walking the streets outside of my mother's house late at night. Because where we grew up at, by the Seattle University, it was the track back then. And my mother hadn't a clue that her daughter was walking around the house at that night, at late at night, because I was married. And so here I was selling my body late at night as a teenager. And so guess what? One of the nights I was out, and a guy decided he's going to pick me up. And he took me to his apartment, and the building still stands today. It's on 14th and Union in Seattle. I know where it is. And he tucked me in, and he pulled a gun on me, and he raped me. I was so devastated. I came out. I was, first of all, glad I was alive, but I went back and I called my husband. Well, I didn't call him. I told him because he was somewhere around afterwards. And he said, here. He gave me a butter knife and said, go back out. Why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story because many of the women that I've worked with through years, this is their story. Many women and girls get raped more than one time a night. And they don't go to your medical services, they don't go to the hospitals, because if they leave their environment, they'll be in trouble. And now, as I was talking earlier, we are so technology savvy today. But one of the things that I'm concerned about with our technology, we have more tracking devices. Not only can they be put on the car, but they can put on your phone. And sometimes kids and girls don't even pay attention that they're being tracked. That every move that they make, that the pimps know where they are. And so in that story, I'm trying to also help you to see that for me, it wasn't that I was forced by someone dragging me out of my home and putting me on the street. And I wasn't raised in a home where my mother had a boyfriend or anybody who was violating me. It was because love was lacking for me that I fell into that trap. Now, there's another young woman that I work with, and her story is her mother turned her out at the age of 11. Well, her mother was drug addicted. Her mother had her own issues that she was dealing with, but she ended up getting her daughter involved in it. And when her daughter finally slowly began to reveal some of her truths, one of the things she said was her grandfather violated her at a young age. But for me, if your grandfather violated you, what drove your mother to drugs? And so it was some generational issues that happened within this family. Another young woman, her story was her father died at 13. Now this young woman feels like she made the choice. Now both of these young women are still in the life. One of them came out for 7 years but went back when her pimp came out of jail. I'll talk about relapse. And so the other one, her father died, so she believes that she made it a choice at the age of 13 to get involved. She did not even correlate that it would have, the triggers came when her father died, that this guy came into her life. And she doesn't recognize that. I'm just telling you a few of those things because I think it's important for us to know what happens in young people's life, including mine. Now, the thing that I want to talk about a couple of things. I do want to talk about outreach, and you guys do have a lot of things coming here. But I also want to talk about, some of the things that I had on the flyer. But one of the things I want to talk about relapse when working with people. I want to talk about relapse because I think sometimes we don't realize that sometimes you can get a person out of it, or a person comes out of this lifestyle, but they relapse. And a lot of times they do relapse. And why do they relapse? Because when they're out of the life, there may be many temptations to return. It's a disease of distorted thinking. And so when you work with people, and this is a part of working, when you work with people, you have to watch what they read or what you invite into your environment, whether you have a home or you have an organization or you're just working one-on-one with a client, or you have to also watch, who they hang out with. For me, I could not watch romantic movies. I could not watch those things. I could not watch a lot of things on TV. And to this day, I don't even like watching violent things because I know the pain of women. It's amazing. Lifetime Channel, they have more violence against women. I'm like, what kind of women's channel is that? And even all of our main shows that are come on, I have no cable, non-cable. Most of them are very violent towards people, and mostly towards women. And we all keep looking at it. We wonder why our society is so easy to accept some of this violence. We put it in our young people's heads. And so why do you not think that young men or even young women don't mind pimping each other? I mean, we write songs about it. We got a show called Pimp My Ride. I mean, you got pimp ringtones. It's like, come on now. And then you think that is not going to be natural to them. And then the other thing in relapse is, it's a reality that some people will relapse. It's not an accident, unaware of the pitfalls, they can stumble blindly, but you're never forced into relapse. It's a choice. For women to make this change, it's a choice. I tell people with Rare Coins and New Horizons that I worked for years, I can't change anybody. You know when my change happened? Is when I decided to make a change. When I got sick and tired of being raped, being abused, then I began to look at, there must be something different. This is not right. And I remember the day that I did that. Somebody asked me that earlier. Was it you, Linda? How I did that was, I was in Phoenix. I was told that we were going to go to Phoenix and we're going to go and make a new start. You won't have to work. But as soon as we landed in Phoenix, my child was taken from me, and I was put on the track. And so in Phoenix, when I was put on the track, the first person to pick me up and pulled a knife to my throat. And I had no clue where I was. My mama didn't know where I was. Nobody knew where I was. And so the guy, for some reason, he couldn't perform. And so something in me, I was just beginning to talk about him, and he drove me back where he found me and took off. But did the road get easier? No. I stayed in Phoenix and it still was hard. And so one day I decided, because Phoenix is really hot in the summer, I convinced my guy, /pimp, /husband, I convinced him that I should go home and prepare for us to start our new life back home. But I had already made up in my mind that when I got home, he would never ever do this to me again. And so I convinced him, and I said, oh, but I should take our son because he's getting sick with all this heat. So he let me go. And so when I got home, I went back to my mother's house and I told him never again. And I never lived with him again. But did that stop the lifestyle for me? Because see, a lot of times just because we take people off the street, it doesn't mean that their life is automatically going to change. No, it didn't stop the lifestyle because I still had friends. All my people that I was around was in that lifestyle. So I kept going out, but this time I kept going out with my girlfriends and hanging out. And I didn't have a pimp in my life, but people kept asking me, I'm going to make you mine. I was like, no, you're not. And so I kept pushing off a lot of pimps. It wasn't easy. But the thing was that I tell people, I had a daytime job too, but what I tell people, and I'm only telling you this is because I'm talking to the faith-based community, I had a spirit of lust on me. So I still kept going in and out of relationships, and when I wasn't working, I still had a lot of other relationships because I was still a broken person. I was not a healed woman. I went in and out of relationships. I had abortions. I did all this crazy stuff because I still wasn't healed from the inside. I still had problems. We can do the surface work, but there's a work that only can be done, and for me it was through Jesus Christ, people. There was a work, and I can remember for years I went along this way, broken relationships, crying out, didn't know God, knew of him, I think, but I didn't really know him. And I don't know how many times I tried to kill myself because of the pain. And I remember one time, this is going to be a video, but they have no record. I remember one time I had gotten such a violent relationship because I was still dealing with these issues. And the guy was so crazy, and he had moved in my house and I couldn't get rid of him. So I took a lot of pills and I decided I was going to kill myself. But as soon as I did it, something in me told me to drink coffee. So I drank a lot of coffee. And then I lived right by Providence Hospital at the time in Seattle. And so I finally told him what I did. So I went to the hospital. Do you know they didn't believe me? So I don't have that on my record. They didn't believe me. But I knew that I had done that. But I'm so glad that I didn't do it because I had a son. Or I think about the time that I was so lost, I used to dance in the strip clubs too. That's why I can talk about that as well. That is just another form of sex trafficking. And I can remember I was so broken and so tired, and this one guy, another guy, moved in, brought his girlfriend, he was pimping, trying to pimp both of us, and I was so broken and so wounded. I was told the truck driver, I said, well, you know what? He's like, oh, I'm going to Phoenix. You want to ride? I was like, I was going to leave my son at that house at first, but then I got in my car and I went with him and my son. And when I got to Phoenix, you know what? I worked for a while. I went to a fortune teller. She wouldn't tell my fortune. She just looked at me like I was crazy. But that was just a protection of the Lord. And so, you know, there's a circuit that women go on. So how do you do, so I'm going to get off my story, but how do you do street outreach? Well, first of all, what we did a lot of things here. You can do work even on the streets on your North First Street. You can just be out there. We just had tables, what we call plastic bins. We just had coffee, condoms that we didn't buy, but we got them from public health. And we just had food for the women. And we had a bad date list where we would give them back the information that they gave to us, where they told you which cars to watch out for, which people to watch out for. We also did different events on the streets. We also worked with the court system where they sent us girls where they had to do the diversion program and they had to be with us. Or community service. We didn't make them do community service. We would begin to talk to them about domestic violence. We begin to talk to them about what was really happening in their lives. We begin to instill in them some of the things that were happening to them. As I said earlier, I also talk about one girl. We began to show her, talk with her, and had her look at money. And she began to realize how much money that she made her pimp, and she was hot. She was upset about that. But that was the door for her to begin to make steps for change, because she recognized that she was given all this money, being abused and misused, and she wasn't getting anything out of it. And so how did we also do that on the streets? We didn't go out trying to tell women what to do. We stood up there as a presence. We just loved them where they were. We were actually letting them talk to us any subject they wanted to, and we would just provide for them. And you know what the women used to say? When you're not there, it's different. Because what they saw was a light. But when we weren't there, that light wasn't there. We didn't preach at them. We just loved them. And I remember one time I put up on the fence, because we had a fence, because we were in the same area on the streets for 11 years, on one corner. What we put up, I put up one time, I said, let's put up 1 Corinthians 13, what love is. And we didn't make them read it. They would stop and read it. And every once in a while, girls say, can we have it? Yeah, take it. You know, because most of them didn't understand what love was. And the other thing, we fasted, we prayed behind the scenes before we went out. I had teams of 4 or 5 people, never went out with 2. Many people say, why come you didn't have men on your team? You know what? If God can't keep you, you won't be kept. We never had any incidents, but I did start a men's team for young men involved in pimping because they were broken. And that team was just men. And they were doing the same work that we were doing with women, because they need help and they need deliverance as well. And we also did case management on the street. Some of you will never get a girl to come into your organization, but if you go where they are, we were out there at 11 o'clock at night to 3 in the morning. Then we changed it to 10 to 2 in the morning. But we met at least an hour ahead of time to pray together, get everything together, and then go out together. Because we learned to take your own vehicles, we took a van, so people won't identify your transportation. So we built a lot of relationships for case management, so when girls needed to go to court or they needed somebody to go with them, we would go to court where we would speak for, we would write letters for. We would also have a relationship with public health where they can go see any doctor within the 24-hour period. And so we had that relationship, so we built relationships with them. And the thing, we had holidays on the street. We did Thanksgiving on the street. And that was just providing them like sweet potato pie, cake, and stuff like that. We did Christmas parties for them. And they would come to our location. And the Christmas party, you know, if you got 10 girls, that was great. Even though I've seen at least 250 in a year or 500 altogether. The other half you couldn't talk to because they wouldn't talk to you. You can't force people to talk to you. If they don't talk to you, you don't talk to them, because you don't know if their pimp is right there watching them, and if you talk to them, you could get them beaten. And so we only talk to those who are willing to talk. And so we just made up stuff to do on the streets with them. And community service, like I said, it was all about trying to find out what was their dreams. What did they want to do before they got involved? And how they could still have this dream. We used to have somebody who paid for education for girls to go back to school. We had a couple of girls actually go to school. And it was awesome that they were able to go to college. One, she was in accounting, and nobody knew her background. Guess what? She was so good, they had her start tutoring other students. Did she finish? No, because her pimp beat her and broke her ribs, so she ended up not finishing, but she was a great student. And we had another one who went to beauty school and finished. And so we were able to buy all the money. We didn't give it to them. We built relationships with the schools where we could pay for them. So that's a great way to help women change, because they need to be able to have something. So that's just a few things. So the church and survivors, why you're needed. It's important that not only the church is involved. You know, we tried to send girls to churches, you know, and as soon as they hit the door, somebody told them their dresses, especially one. Her daughter loved Jesus, but as soon as she hit the door, somebody told her her shirt was too low cut, the usher at the door. You know what? This was a girl who wore nothing hardly out on the streets. So if she had a low-cut shirt, she was fully dressed, people.
That's right.
And so then we convinced her again to go back. This time she went to a different church, and she had a miniskirt on. I mean, she would wear baby dolls on the track in the winter. And guess what? She sat up front, and someone gave her that wonderful cloth to hide her. And did you think she went back? And today, not only is she still working, guess what? Her little girl is working. The little girl who was trying to love Jesus, who's now a teenager. Now she's doing what her mama did. Church, we have to be ready to receive people. When I came to the Lord, nobody told me, Sheila, you can't wear this split up the ear anymore. The Spirit of God began to change me. The day I went to church, when I realized I had a call experience, I wasn't looking to go to church that day, but the sun shined out of heaven and pointed to the church that I needed to go to. And you know what? I went home first, told my kids I'd be back, and borrowed a slip from my neighbor, because I didn't have a slip, because that's not the kind of dresser I was. And so I went back to church that day, and I got saved, and I've never been the same. And so you don't have to clean them up, people. The Spirit of God will clean us up.
That's right.
And doesn't mean that I still don't like flashy and fun stuff. Oh, I still do. Oh, we get along great, you know. We don't have to change them to the point where they're no longer them. And so, and the other thing I would say, church, don't tell their stories. Don't exploit them again, and organizations, don't exploit them again. Let them get healed and begin to tell their own stories. Come alongside of them, support them. One of the things that I see in this movement right now that troubles me, people like me, nobody wants to pay us. But if you did the research, you can get paid. I got a problem with that. And everybody knows me, know I got a problem with that. But you know, we have to respect the people. It's really important to respect the survivors. And then let them share in their own time. Because you know what? Everybody heals differently. I have a friend who was out 30 years. And you know what? And she worked with me. And she realized that all those years that she was more or less like the Stockholm Syndrome. She had never identified herself as a victim. Because that was the way that she protected herself. And so it takes people different time frames in order for them to be ready to tell their story. And so, as I said, they need restoration of their soul, and I know I should be done. Restoration of their soul. They need a place for true forgiveness, church, organization, faith-based people, and others. They need to be accepted. They need emotional healing. They need inner change. You know, I tell the story of my change. I went to a group, it was called Women's Aglow, if anybody know about them. Okay, you guys are some glow people. And you know, I love Women's Aglow. I ended up going to one after I got saved, and I didn't know anything about it. A group of women started praying for me, older women, and it was more of a Pentecostal glow. And I tell people, so you know I was on the floor. They laid hands on me and I was on the floor. But you know what happened to me was on the floor. I was a new Christian. all of a sudden I began to see the chains break in the spiritual realm. They began to break off me. I didn't know I was chained up, but I could literally see the chains coming off of my life. And you know how I ended up in a glow? God showed me women's aglow in a dream. He knew I needed those chains broken off my life. Because sometimes we don't see the spiritual change. People sometimes are chained up, but we can only see them in the natural. Nobody could have told me that if it didn't happen to me. And the same thing with suicide. I can remember the day that I got healed. I literally seen that thing come up out of me. But I also seen it one day when I was in the same kitchen trying to come back. I said, oh no, not coming back here. And so those things are important. And then, like I said, that's the interchange, but peace. They need the peace. They need to be able to come into a place where they're accepted. Not because of what they do, but because of who they are. And for those, a lot of times when people work in this work, you guys have a helping attitude. You know what? You can't do the work for them. And make sure you do your own work before you try to help others. Because don't put your helping self onto them. Because sometimes we do that. We want to rescue the world. But are we saved? Are we not saved, but are we healed with our own stuff? Because you don't want to put that stuff on other people. And yes, I think there's needed more work with men as well as young women. Come on. And so I do think that there's more work needed. And I know it was a short time, but I hope you got something out of this. And I do think that other people are doing a great work. Everybody is needed in this. I see women that are aged in here. Let me tell you, if you can get on your knees and pray for somebody. We never seen anybody get killed. We never seen anybody lost. And it was not because of just what we were doing. We had a community, a faith-based community that prayed for us. We were protected. And so you can always do something. Everybody doesn't have to go to the street. Everybody doesn't have to go to an organization. You can give. You can do so many things. And men, we need men to stop this cycle of young people. We need prevention in the schools. There's so many things we can do to start heading this thing off, instead of always coming along afterwards and trying to do the restoration at the end. Let's try to do it and start with our young people.